get us started tonight. In October of 2009, I was walking briskly through the port of Miami. Moments earlier, I had signed off of a cruise ship that I had lived and worked on for the previous 119 days. I was very much a nomad at that point, and behind me I had 2 large suitcases and a backpack on my back, and all told, this comprised about 46% of everything I owned in this world. I round the corner, full of vim and vigor, and then I see the dog. More specifically, the drug-sniffing German Shepherd. And I know that I've made a terrible error in judgment. In my wallet, wrapped very tightly in cellophane and Scotch tape because it was a premeditated crime, was the equivalent of $4 remaining of a $10 bag of marijuana. Let's be cool and not judge me. I have no choice except to go forward. So I walk past the dog. He gives me a friendly sniff. The agent with the leash gives me a little bit of customs humor, and he says, "It's my first day. I don't know if he bites." I give him a everything's cool laugh, and then I continue walking forward. I get about 2 feet from the door when I hear him say, "Excuse me, sir, my dog has just informed me that you have an illegal substance on your body. Is that true?" Now, I'm busted. The dog is absolutely correct, and it's my word against the dog's. So in this moment, I thought my best tactic was to use my charm, my wit, and my honesty. And I looked at him and I flashed a big stupid grin and I said, "Yes, it is." At this point, his friendly demeanor was gone. "All right, sir, here's what's going to happen. This man is a federal agent. He and I are going to escort you back. We are going to search your things. We are going to treat you with courtesy and respect. Do you understand everything I just said to you?" All hope flushed from my body in the form of underarm sweat. They took me to a back room with a lot of long tables. All of my stuff is laid out and the search begins. It is at this point that I am introduced to a customs agent, a man who has been assigned to me, who from this point on I will refer to simply as the hard-on. Now, the hard-on did not like me from the beginning. He did not like my vibe or my drug smuggling ways one bit. And I was so nervous, and I asked him, "What's going to happen to me?" And he said, "Oh, I don't know, man. You messed up. You messed up really big. You're probably going to jail." At this moment, at the other end of the table, an older customs agent is going through my suitcase, and he pulls out a manila envelope about yay big. And my heart sinks because I know I'm about to be horribly embarrassed because I've kept the contents of that envelope secret for the previous 119 days. In it were 5 unpackaged DVDs that were just part of my collection. And once he sees the title and cover art, he's going to know exactly what these are. So suppressing all embarrassment and summoning all the strength I could muster, I put my hands on the table. I lean forward and I say, "That's porn. You're about to open an envelope of porn." He opens it, and I am proven correct. Now the hard-on says to me immediately, and I quote, "Kiddie porn? Better not be kiddie porn. You're in enough trouble as it is." Now there are times in certain situations where I react verbally. Not thinking, hoping that my charm and my wit will prevail. And I don't know where I summoned the moxie for this particular statement, but I responded, "I know marijuana is a gateway drug, but I think kiddie porn is pretty far down the path." He found this neither informative nor charming. They took me to a back room where they were going to search my bathing suit area. And I put my hands up on the wall as instructed, and another customs agent comes up behind me and says basically to the nape of my neck, "I'm going to touch you." Once again, I don't know where the moxie came from on this, but I responded, sure, as long as I'm not forced to touch you. I go back into the main room where the hard-on is now going through my backpack. And in my backpack are all the special things that I would not check onto an airplane. They're the things that I had to keep on my person. And he goes to the bottom of the bag and he pulls out this book. This is my journal from 2006, my meticulous, handwritten, picture-laden journal from 2006. And he audaciously begins reading excerpts from it. Very quickly, he discovers something in here. He looks up from the book, points at it, and asks, "What is this?" And what I told him changed everything. And from this point on, the man who had recently accused me of owning child pornography now made it his goal to get me released without charges. He conferred with his CO. They determined that my crime was not that egregious, and they should just let me go with a small fine and a slap on the wrist. And if you were curious as to what he read in that journal, then I am more than happy to tell you in part 2. Part 2. When I was 35 years old, I went home to live with my mother, Patty. Patty was a cute little red-haired cat lady. Funny, intelligent, weird, in the best way possible. I always described her as a lovable eccentric who just did things her own way. Case in point, when I was 8 years old, my parents were voted Homeowners of the Month, and our picture was going to grace the cover of the Inlet Beach Social. Heard of it? We went down to the tennis courts to have our picture taken by the professional photographer, and he lines us up, me, my father, and Patty. And as he's backing up, he says, "Okay, just look at that tree behind me." Now my father and I, knowing exactly which tree he meant, looked right at it. Patty, on the other hand, as she admitted later, thought, "That's just too easy. He couldn't mean that one." So she went about 25 degrees to the right, found a tree way off in the distance, gave a half squint, half smile, and the picture was taken. So in Patty's and my shorthand, those code words, those phrases that all families have where you know exactly what they mean, staring at your own tree for 25 years came to mean to do things your own way, to be off kilter or outside of the presumed norm. But it makes perfect sense to you. A few years after that picture was taken, my parents divorced, and Patty went from being a stay-at-home mom to a single mother in a blink. So for a majority of my life, she was my primary, she had primary custody, and then from there, it was mostly just the two of us. Now, the reason I was living at home was because Patty had been recently diagnosed as terminal, given 6 months to a year left to live, and she asked me to come home and help her through it. I said yes immediately, and within 2 weeks, I had put my life on indefinite hold, and I arrived at Jacksonville International Airport after a very long and difficult travel day. At the top of the escalators going down to baggage claim, I see Patty at the bottom, and she's beaming. She's so excited to see me, and I return the smile in kind. And now we have an entire escalator ride until I get down to her. And one of my favorite games to play with people is when we see each other from a distance, and what do we do in the time until we actually meet up? So I began to dance on the escalator. And that made her laugh, and that made me dance even harder. And then very quickly, those tears, or the laughter morphed into tears. And because I react to crying the same way I do to vomiting, I started crying myself. And then when I get to the bottom of the escalator, we embrace, and I whisper into her ear, "Are you crying because of why I've come home, or because my plane is 2 hours late?" And she whispered back, "Both." It was at that moment that I knew that I had made the right decision to come home. Now, what I just told you was a very touching moment between a mother and a son. But let's not kid ourselves here. If you boil it down to the bare bones, I was a 35-year-old man living with his mother again in a home we'd not shared in 17 years. And it is amazing how quickly you revert to old behavior patterns. Patty and I adored each other, but my God, we could push each other's buttons. And she could say things to me that just would make me so mad. Because it wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Case in point. Early on in my stay, we are in her car. She's in the passenger seat, I'm driving, and we are engaged in what I believe to be a comfortable silence. She pipes up with, "Kevin, if you're trying to hit every pothole, you're doing a very good job." You know what happened next? A tantrum. A big fucking tantrum. That culminated in me saying, "You do realize I'm a grown man, right?" It was at this point that we made a pledge to each other, that we were in this together, and that there were going to be times we had to look past our roles of mother and son, and that she promised that she would do her best to treat me like an adult, and I promised that I would do my best not to act like a child. The way that we upheld this pledge was that we made it into a job with actual responsibilities where I had a title. My title was I was her primary caregiver. And with that, I was paid $75 cash every week that I received every Friday. Jealous? When I first got there, I had two main responsibilities, both of them vastly different. The first one was, Patty was a steadfast worker, and she wanted to work up until the last day that she possibly could. So I would drive her to work every morning at 9, I'd pick her up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then I'd be on call the rest of the day in case she needed me. This left me 6 hours to do with as I pleased. I would go to the gym for a couple of hours where I got in absolutely ridiculous shape. I'd go have a smart lunch, maybe a beer at lunch. And then I would go home and I would engage in my new hobby. One that I picked up while I was at home, one that I'm going to share with you now, completely and totally, unapologetically. Scrapbooking. I love it. I'm very good at it. And I find it therapeutic and rewarding. Patty loved that I did it, and she encouraged me to continue. And she said, "You journal every day. Why don't you take your scrapbooking skills and bleed that into your journal?" And I said, "Great, that sounds like a wonderful idea. It's not like law enforcement officials will ever in my life make me tell them what's in it." At the time, Patty and I used to joke that I could easily be described as a 35-year-old heterosexual male with the hobbies of a 75-year-old woman in the body of a 25-year-old gay man. My second job responsibility was very different, and it was this. Patty had a rare form of cancer called a leiomyosarcoma, which was a free-floating tumor that was making its way through her body and eventually shutting down her organs systematically. To do this, it had to expend energy. Therefore, it had to expel a waste product, which was in the form of a liquid that would collect on her lungs throughout the day. My second job responsibility was that every morning at 7:30 a.m. I would take a stent that was connected to the inside of her body and I would hook it up to a vacuum. And then we would drain that fluid off of her lungs. The process took about 90 seconds and we get about 1 liter of fluid off each time. We had a signal that when she felt empty, she would raise her hand in the air and I would have to immediately close the valve. As warned by the doctors, were either of us to miss this timing, all the liquid would be gone and then air would be violently sucked out of her lungs, and in her weakened state she would have a heart attack and die in front of me. So for a few seconds every day, Patty's life was in my hands. Optimism was a full-time job because we had a daily reminder that this is real. And I will be very candid with you right now. That at the beginning, there were times I wanted to run as far away from this as I possibly could. It was too much for me to bear at times, and I was just overwhelmed with what was being asked of me. But then one night I had a sobering moment that just knocked me back into reality, where she and I were having a major battle royale verbal tete-a-tete, and I was acting like a child because I was lamenting all the things that I gave up to come home and help her, and that I was just stuck in this weird quagmire, and I can't believe how much my life is now just passing me by, and I culminated and punctuated it with, I just want my life back. To which Patty, with calm reserve, looked at me and said, "So do I, Kevin. So do I." It was then that I knew that there was no going back and that we were stuck and that we were in this together and that nothing was going to change the inevitability of what was going to happen and that we just had to deal with it. But then one night, everything changed. We were watching the 3rd season of The West Wing, which is our favorite show, and there was a quote that came on that caught her ear and left an indelible mark, and it became the cornerstone of how we looked at this entire thing. And the paraphrased quote is this: "We all fall, and it matters. But when the fall is all you have left, it matters a great deal." This springboarded us into having some very honest conversations, going in deeply into subjects that we were before scared to talk about. And it posed the question, what do you do when you know beyond a shadow of a doubt when you're going to die? Do you let that knowledge crush you and depress you and leave you in a fit of despair? Or do you accept your fate? Do you find a way to live comfortably? And do you do what you want to do, holding your head high? I asked her, "How do you want to go out?" And she responded, "I don't want to go out with a whimper. I do not want people feeling sorry for me." This led me to one night suggest, what if we threw a party for you? Like a grand bon voyage. I would MC it, and we would invite people from all through her life, and I would put on a show, and it would just be this fun tribute night. And she loved the idea. And we started talking about it, having these little fantasy talks of who we'd invite, what it would be like, and then it became really fun for us. But there was one thing holding her back before she would fully commit to the party. If Patty was here to describe herself, she would say that she was fiscally frugal. But because she is not here to defend herself, she was a cheapskate who refused to spend money. The next day I did some pricing, and I went and I reported back to her that for us to have it at the venue that she wanted, it was going to cost a minimum of $8,000. And she said, "Oh no." This was a very good idea, but no. I went away and I thought about it, and I came back to her with this argument. I said, "Mom, you have the money. I'm about to inherit that money, and this is how I would choose to spend it." We tabled the discussion, and we went away. Later that night, I was sitting in my bedroom working on a very masculine scrapbook. And Patty stood in my doorway, and she said, "Kevin, my entire life I've been saving for the future. The future's now, isn't it?" And I said, "Yeah, it is." And she said, "Okay, let's have this party. Because," and I quote, "I will never get to see you get married or become a father. So this is just going to have to be the next best thing." At this point, planning began, and it was a very exciting time for us because it was something that we could talk about, something that we could plan for, and most importantly, it gave us something to look forward to because we desperately needed it. One night, while a little wine tipsy at dinner, we started playing this game. A game that I came up with called "Tell Me Something You've Never Told Me, and I'll Tell You Stuff I've Never Told You." And we told each other stories. Here were my two favorites. Mine, 3 3 years before, in the summer of 2003, I went to a backyard barbecue with some friends in Chicago. It was an absolutely glorious sunny day. There were friends everywhere, beer was flowing, laughter, so much laughter. And in the backyard, a soccer ball got pulled out and started being kicked around. And inevitably, this ball went over the fence, the 3-foot-high chain link perimeter fence. Me, being in shape, said, "Oh, I'll get it," and jumped right over the fence, landed, got the ball, threw it back in play, jumped right back over, and rejoined the game. I did this effortlessly 5 times. Time 6, I was cocky and tired. And as I jumped over, my shoelace got caught on the chain link, taking my feet out from underneath me, and I plummeted 3 feet onto the concrete, onto my face. And Patty said, "Oh my God, Kevin, why didn't you tell me this?" And I said, "Obviously, because I didn't want you to worry." It's all right, it all worked out fine. It all worked out fine. The worst part about this picture to me is the necklace. And if the camera went down low enough, you would also see a thumb ring. Now, as good as my story was, Patty had one that absolutely broke my heart. When she was 24 years old, Patty married my father. Never being one of the popular kids, Patty was nervous to have a wedding shower thrown in her honor. Her roommate at the time was also her maid of honor, and she said, "Don't you worry about it. Everything's going to be fine." We cut to the day of the shower, and Patty, my grandmother, and the roommate sat in a sparsely decorated room for over an hour, and no one else showed up. To a 24-year-old woman, this was a devastating and defining moment for her, because as she admitted to me that night, it was an ongoing fear that no one comes to my party. It was at this moment that I knew that this party was no longer just a want, that it was a need, and I had to deliver this for her. She had done so much for me in my life, and it was just something I had to do. Because as I told her, and I said this specifically because I knew I'd want to repeat it later, I said, I have nowhere else to be, so I might as well give you all I've got. Then things got harder, quickly, but I doubled my efforts, and I tried to contend with everything you have to contend with as you plan an event of this size, plus the health of the person who's supposed to be there. 5 days before the party, her health takes a sharp turn and she has to be rushed to the hospital, where I'm told that she did not have much more time. Then, out-of-town guests start to arrive, including family members with opinions. And not everybody thought the idea for the party was awesome. There were some that did not like it, including one, her brother, who said to me a few days before that you have to cancel this party because what you two are doing is morbid and completely inappropriate. But then Patty did something that I had never seen her do before. She stood her ground and she said, "This party is going to happen whether I am there or not." This was going to be her crowning moment, and by God, she was going to have it. And you could either get on board or get out of the way. It was amazing to witness. But let's be real. I knew her very well. She had already spent $8,000 non-refundable dollars on this. We cut to the day of the party. June 24th, 2006, 7:30 p.m., and I will never, ever forget this moment. We are standing in the beautiful Sawgrass Marriott Resort in lovely Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, in front of the closed doors of Banquet Hall A. Patty is behind me in a wheelchair, about to be wheeled in by my Uncle Andy, and I am exhausted. I have not slept in days, and I cannot believe that we've actually made it to this point. I turn to her, and I touch her hand, and she gives my hand a reassuring squeeze, and I mouth to her, "Here we go." And I turn around, and I put my hands on the doors, and fueled only by adrenaline and 2 watered-down vodka cranberries, I pushed the doors open and I announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, Patty McGeehan," and the place goes wild. And the piano player bursts into a rousing rendition of the West Wing theme. And everyone who said they were going to be there had shown up, and all of them are on their feet, clapping wildly. And Patty McGeehan enters the room to her first and her last standing ovation, and it is magnificent to witness. I jump on stage and I begin the proceedings for the night. First were 2 songs that I'd written specifically for the event. The first song was a story song that was based on the story of when I was 12 years old, and she and I got very sick on Christmas and had to be quarantined in the house for 2 weeks. So she couldn't shop for Christmas presents, so she didn't know what to do for me on Christmas morning. So what she did was she got books that we already owned and rewrapped them and hid them all around the house. And then she came up with this treasure hunt with his clues where I had to go and decipher them and go to the next spot that had a book we already owned that had been rewrapped. And as a 12-year-old on Christmas, I fucking hated it. But as an adult, I totally get it. You make the best out of what you have. The next song was a thank you song that I wrote from her perspective, thanking everyone for coming to this very unorthodox event. And because it worked out so beautifully, I used the Golden Girls theme because we actually threw a party, invited everyone she knew, and the biggest gift was from me. Then we moved on to the slideshow presentations. What I had done is I'd gone through our extensive archives of pictures, and I'd found pictures of everyone who was at the party because I'm unapologetically a scrapbooker. And I put them all up on the screen so they could all feel like they were a part of the night and not just observers. Then, the second slideshow was the theme haircuts Patty and I have shared throughout the years. And that just goes wonderfully. In case you're wondering, I'm the taller, zittier one. The evening is going along beautifully. There's a lot of laughter, everybody's just having a really good time, and then someone makes a terrible error in judgment, thereby warranting them a nickname as well. So Boner Move grabs the microphone, and Boner Move and I went to high school together, and he starts off by giving this speech where he tells this really funny anecdote about when we were in the theater program together in high school, and it gets a very big laugh. And then he gets addicted to this laugh. And he takes it one step farther. He makes a bold move. And he tells everyone that he and another guy in high school used to think Patty was a MILF. Now, Patty had never seen American Pie, or was she a fan of that particular subgenre of porn? So it doesn't get the laugh he feels it so justly deserves. So what he does is he feels it necessary to define the acronym by telling her that teenage boys at one point wanted to fuck her. Would you like to see it? You're going to anyway.
I'm sorry. And I love you. Kevin, you need to know that your mother is a MILF. Okay? And it's not just me, and these names aren't going to mean anything to the rest of you, but I need to let you know. Now, and Patty needs to know, Milton, Fred, and Sean agreed with me. Kevin's mother is a MILF. And we didn't have the heart to tell Kevin. But the truth is, and please, if you have children, cover your ears. Patty, teenage boys wanted to fuck you. Okay? Now, please, I know that's creepier than the twin story, but that is the truth. And Patty, you need to know that. Okay? You do. And I do. Kevin, I'm sorry. Okay? Let me continue.
British office uncomfortable. But the rest of the evening goes great. The evening finishes up with a receiving line where everyone got to say goodbye to Patty, but most importantly, everyone got to say goodbye to her. And the best part about that whole thing was that this party was going to be everyone's final memory of her. And as I was watching the receiving line from a distance, I can say with assuredness that while there was sorrow in the farewells, there was not one person who felt sorry for her. At the end of the night, as she was about to be wheeled out, she called me over to her, and she gestured for me to lean down, and she kissed me on the cheek, and she said, "Thank you, Kevin. This was so much better than my wedding shower." To which I responded, "You're very welcome, but that one really wasn't hard to beat." 8 days later, as I was holding her hand, she drew her final breath. Her last words to me were, "You're a good man, Charlie Brown." 3 years later, that good man is standing in the port of Miami, detained by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. As a man I have nicknamed the Hard-On is reading my journal, and he points at the book, and he asked me, "What is this?" And I gave him a very short answer. I said, "It's the journal I kept in the 5 months I lived with my mother right before she died, but everything worked out okay because we gave her a party." And the Hard-On's face just changed. And he said, "Was it cancer?" And I said, "Yeah, it was." And he said, "My grandmother just died of cancer." And I said, "I'm very sorry to hear that." And suddenly I'm a human being to him. And he told me a joke. He goes, "What do you get when you cross a brown chicken and a brown cow?" "Brown chicken, brown cow." I gave him a, "That's awesome, dude," laugh. Conferred with the CO, and they got me released. And I had to pay a small fine. And there were no charges, but I was told that my name is now on a list. That if I ever go to the port of Miami, my things will be searched. But I found my loophole. I'll never go to the port of Miami. There are many things I got to thank Patty for, specifically this party, which was as much of a gift for me as it was for her. I walked out of that house different than how I walked in, and I truly believe it was for my betterment. Because I got to see Patty face her fears and conquer them. And she showed me beyond a shadow of a doubt that no matter how much the chips may be stacked against you, that there is a way to hold your head high, because when the fall was all she had left, it mattered a great deal. And she did it, staring at her own tree. But the thing I never got to thank Patty for was encouraging me to journal and scrapbook, because ultimately both those things helped me avoid federal drug charges.